Have you ever been told to stay small so others could feel big? Have you ever hidden your success, your achievements, your wins, just to keep the peace with people who were supposed to celebrate you? I have. And let me tell you, the moment I decided to stop hiding, everything changed. My name doesn't matter for this story, but what matters is what I lived through, what I endured, and what I finally broke free from. This is my story about relatives who expected me to stay quiet about my success, and what happened when I refused to dim my light anymore. I was raised in a family where success was celebrated, but only for certain people, only for the ones who fit a specific mold, who followed a particular path, who didn't threaten the established hierarchy. I remember being a child, maybe 7 or 8 years old, coming home with a certificate for academic excellence. My hands were shaking with excitement as I burst through the front door, my little heart racing with pride. I had worked so hard, staying up late practicing my spelling words, reading ahead in my textbooks, raising my hand in class even when I was scared of being wrong. And there it was, a beautiful certificate with gold embossing and my name printed in elegant letters. I couldn't wait to show my parents, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles who were gathered for Sunday dinner. But the reaction I got wasn't what I expected. My mother took the certificate from my hands, glanced at it briefly and said, "That's nice, sweetie," before turning back to help my grandmother in the kitchen. My father patted my head absently, his attention fixed on the television, and my Uncle Richard, the family patriarch, the one everyone deferred to, looked at me with something I couldn't quite identify at the time but now recognize as discomfort, maybe even resentment. "Don't get too big for your britches," he said, his voice carrying that edge of warning that adults use when they want to keep children in line. Pride comes before a fall. I remember feeling my excitement deflate like a punctured balloon. The certificate suddenly felt heavy in my hands, not like an achievement anymore, but like evidence of something shameful. I folded it carefully and took it to my room, where I tucked it into a drawer, hidden away from sight. That was the first time, but it wouldn't be the last. As I grew older, the pattern became clearer, more established, more suffocating. Every achievement came with an unspoken expectation. Don't talk about it too much. Don't seem too proud. Don't make others feel bad about themselves. It was as if my success was somehow a personal attack on everyone else's sense of self-worth. When I made the honor roll in middle school, I learned to mention it quietly, almost apologetically. When I got accepted into a prestigious high school program, I downplayed it, emphasizing how lucky I was rather than how hard I had worked. When I won a scholarship competition, I barely mentioned it at all, afraid of the uncomfortable silence that would follow, the way conversations would shift, the way eyes would avoid mine. The message was clear. Your success makes us uncomfortable, so hide it, diminish it, pretend it doesn't matter. And because I loved my family, because I wanted to belong, because I craved their approval and acceptance, I complied. I became an expert at making myself smaller, at hiding my achievements, at celebrating privately while presenting a facade of humble mediocrity to the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But here's what nobody tells you about hiding your light. It doesn't just affect how others see you, it affects how you see yourself. Every time I downplayed an achievement, I internalized the message that my success wasn't worth celebrating. Every time I hit a win, I reinforced the belief that there was something wrong with being successful, something shameful about working hard and achieving goals. I started to feel guilty for wanting more, for dreaming big, for setting ambitious goals. I felt like I was betraying my family by being ambitious, as if my success somehow diminished theirs, as if there was only a limited amount of achievement to go around, and by taking some for myself, I was stealing from them. The emotional weight of this was crushing. I developed anxiety around sharing good news. My stomach would twist into knots whenever I had something positive to share, my mind racing through potential reactions, trying to predict who would be hurt, who would be offended, who would feel threatened. I rehearsed conversations in my head, finding ways to minimize my achievements, to make them seem accidental or unimportant. I became hypervigilant about other people's feelings, constantly monitoring their reactions, adjusting my words and demeanor to keep everyone comfortable, even at the expense of my own authenticity and self-expression. Have you ever felt like you had to shrink yourself to fit into spaces that should have expanded to accommodate you? Comment below if you've experienced this, because I know I'm not alone in this struggle. The pattern continued into my college years, where I attended a good university on a full scholarship. My family's reaction to this achievement was telling. There was no celebration, No party, no acknowledgement of the hard work it had taken to earn that scholarship. Instead, there were subtle jabs disguised as concern. "Don't forget where you came from," my Aunt Linda said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "College changes people, and not always for the better." My cousin Marcus, who had dropped out of community college after one semester, made constant jokes about me being too good for the family now, about how I probably looked down on everyone, about how I was going to leave and never come back. The implication was clear. My education was a betrayal. My ambition was arrogance. My success was an indictment of everyone who hadn't achieved the same. I spent those college years in a constant state of emotional turmoil. On campus, I was thriving. I was making Dean's List every semester, getting involved in research projects, building relationships with professors who saw potential in me, networking with peers who were equally ambitious and driven. For the first time in my life, I was in an environment where success was celebrated, where working hard was admired, where dreaming big was encouraged. But the moment I came home for breaks, I had to shed that identity like an uncomfortable costume. I learned to talk less about my classes, my projects, my plans. I learned to nod and smile when relatives made comments about fancy book learning, or asked sarcastically if I was too smart to help with family events. I learned to bite my tongue when they assumed I thought I was better than them, even though I had never said or implied anything of the sort. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting. I was living two completely different lives, presenting two completely different versions of myself, and neither felt fully authentic. At school, I was confident and ambitious, but I always felt like an imposter, afraid that if I fully embraced my success, I would lose my family. At home, I was small and apologetic, but I always felt resentful, angry at having to hide the parts of myself that I was most proud of. The emotional toll of this double life was immense. I struggled with depression, feeling like no matter what I did, I was failing someone. If I succeeded and talked about it, I was hurting my family. If I succeeded and hid it, I was hurting myself. If I didn't succeed, I was wasting my potential and opportunities. There was no winning scenario, no path that led to both authenticity and acceptance. I remember one particular Thanksgiving during my junior year, sitting at the family table, listening to my relatives talk about their lives, their jobs, their struggles. My Uncle Richard was complaining about his boss, about how unfair the workplace was, about how people who didn't deserve success were getting ahead, while hard workers like him were overlooked. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was a man who worked hard, yes, but who also spent every evening watching television instead of pursuing additional skills or education, who complained about his circumstances but never took action to change them, who resented anyone who did take action as if their success was a personal attack on his choices. My Aunt Linda chimed in with her own complaints, and soon the entire table was engaged in a collective commiseration session about how unfair life was, how the system was rigged, how success was all about luck and connections rather than merit and hard work. I sat there silently, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. I wanted to share that I had just been accepted into a competitive internship program, that I had been offered a research assistant position that would look incredible on my graduate school applications, that I was on track to graduate summa cum laude. But I knew what would happen if I spoke up. The energy would shift. The conversation would die. There would be a moment of uncomfortable silence, followed by forced congratulations that felt more like accusations, followed by subtle or not so subtle comments designed to take me down a peg, to remind me not to get too big for my britches, to ensure I knew my place in the family hierarchy. So I stayed quiet. I nodded along with their complaints. I validated their feelings of being overlooked and undervalued, and inside I died a little bit more, feeling the gap between who I was and who I was pretending to be grow wider and deeper. That night, lying in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt something shift inside me. A small voice, one I had been suppressing for years, whispered, "This isn't right. You shouldn't have to hide who you are to make other people comfortable. Your success isn't a threat to anyone. Your achievements don't diminish anyone else's worth. You deserve to be celebrated, not shamed. You deserve to take up space, not shrink into the background." But that voice was still small, still tentative, still easily drowned out by years of conditioning and the deep-seated need for family acceptance. It would take more time, more experiences, more hurt before I would finally listen to that voice and act on it. The breaking point came shortly after I graduated from college. I had landed an incredible job at a prestigious company, something I had worked toward for years. The position came with a salary that was more than anyone in my family had ever made, with benefits and opportunities for advancement that seemed almost too good to be true. I was over the moon with excitement, pride, and relief that my hard work had paid off. For once, I decided I was going to share my good news fully and authentically. I was going to let myself be excited, be proud, be open about this achievement. I called my mother first, my voice bubbling with enthusiasm as I told her about the job, the salary, the incredible opportunity I had been given. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, instead of the congratulations I had been hoping for, I heard, "That's a lot of money. I hope you're not going to forget about your family now that you're making more than the rest of us. Money changes people, you know. Don't let it change you." The joy I had been feeling evaporated instantly. Instead of celebrating with me, my own mother was preemptively accusing me of becoming someone I wasn't, of abandoning my family, of letting success corrupt me. I tried to explain that nothing would change, that I was still the same person, that I just wanted to share my happiness with her. But she had already moved on to talking about her own problems, about bills she was struggling to pay, about how unfair it was that some people had it easy while others struggled. The implication was clear. I was one of the lucky ones who had it easy, and therefore I couldn't possibly understand real struggle, real work, real life. When I shared the news with my extended family at the next gathering, the reaction was even worse. My Uncle Richard's face darkened as I explained about my new position. "Must be nice," he said, his voice heavy with sarcasm and resentment. "Some of us have to work for a living instead of sitting in fancy offices pushing papers." My cousin Marcus laughed and said, "Guess you're too important to hang out with us regular folks now." My Aunt Linda pursed her lips and said, "Pride is a sin, you know. The Bible says the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. You might want to remember that." I looked around the room at these people I loved, these people I had grown up with, these people whose approval I had been seeking my entire life, and I saw nothing but discomfort, resentment, and thinly veiled hostility. Not one person congratulated me genuinely. Not one person asked about the details of my job or what I would be doing. Not one person seemed happy for me. Instead, they all seemed personally offended by my success, as if I had achieved this position specifically to make them feel bad about themselves. In that moment, something broke inside me. Not in a destructive way, but in a liberating way. I realized that no matter what I did, no matter how much I diminished myself, no matter how hard I tried to make myself small and unthreatening, it would never be enough. They didn't want me to succeed. They wanted me to struggle alongside them, to validate their choices and their limitations, to provide evidence that hard work and ambition were pointless, that success was impossible, that dreaming big was foolish. My success threatened their worldview, their excuses, their comfort with mediocrity. And suddenly I understood that their discomfort was not my responsibility. Their feelings of inadequacy were not caused by my achievements. Their resentment was not something I needed to manage or accommodate. I had spent my entire life trying to make other people comfortable with my existence, and in doing so, I had made myself deeply uncomfortable, denying my own truth, suppressing my own pride, hiding my own light. That night I made a decision. I was done hiding. I was done apologizing for my success. I was done making myself small so others could feel big. I was done sacrificing my authenticity on the altar of other people's comfort. I was going to live my life fully, celebrate my wins openly, share my journey honestly, and if that made people uncomfortable, that was their problem to solve, not mine. The decision was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I knew there would be consequences. I knew the backlash would be intense. I knew I might lose relationships I valued. But I also knew that continuing to live the way I had been living was slowly killing my spirit, my confidence, my sense of self. I had to choose between their comfort and my authenticity, and for the first time in my life, I chose myself. The first test of my new resolve came just a few weeks later when I started my new job. On my first day, I took a photo in my office, nothing fancy, just me in professional attire with my new company lanyard, smiling genuinely because I was proud and excited. I posted it on social media with a caption about new beginnings and gratitude for the opportunity. Within minutes, my phone was blowing up. Messages from family members, some concerned, some passive-aggressive, some openly hostile. Why are you showing off? Do you think you're better than everyone? Some of us are struggling and you're rubbing your success in our faces. This is really inappropriate and hurtful. I stared at these messages, feeling the old familiar guilt and anxiety rising in my chest, the urge to delete the post, to apologize, to explain that I didn't mean anything by it, to shrink back into the comfortable, invisible space I had occupied for so long. But then I remembered my decision. I remembered the years of hiding, the constant self-censorship, the exhausting performance of being less than I was, and I decided not to respond to the negative messages. Instead, I focused on the positive responses from friends, colleagues, and a few distant relatives who genuinely congratulated me. I refused to let the resentment of a few people steal the joy of my accomplishment. Over the following months, I continued to share my life authentically on social media and in conversations. When I got a promotion, I posted about it. When I reached a professional milestone, I celebrated it. When I achieved something I was proud of, I shared it. Each time there was backlash from certain family members. The comments ranged from subtle digs to outright accusations. Must be nice to have everything handed to you. Some people have real problems. Success has really changed you, and not for the better. You've become so arrogant and self-centered. But something interesting happened as I continued to refuse to hide. The discomfort they felt became increasingly visible, and I started to understand the deeper dynamics at play. My success wasn't actually the problem. The problem was that my success contradicted the narrative they had built about why they weren't successful. For years, my family had operated on the belief that success was about luck, connections, being in the right place at the right time, or somehow cheating the system. This belief allowed them to avoid taking responsibility for their own choices and circumstances. It was comforting to believe that success was external and random, rather than the result of hard work, planning, and sacrifice. My visible success threatened that belief system. If I, coming from the same family, the same socio-economic background, the same starting point, could achieve what I had achieved, then it meant success wasn't just about luck. It meant that choices mattered, that education mattered, that delayed gratification and long-term planning mattered. And if those things mattered, then they had to confront the uncomfortable reality that their own circumstances were at least partially the result of their own choices. This was too threatening to accept, so instead, they constructed a different narrative. I had changed, I had become arrogant, I had betrayed my roots, I thought I was better than everyone. I was showing off. This narrative allowed them to dismiss my success as a character flaw, rather than confront their own choices and limitations. Understanding this dynamic was both heartbreaking and liberating. Heartbreaking because I realized that my family's rejection wasn't really about me at all. It was about their own insecurities and unwillingness to grow. Liberating because it meant I could stop taking their reactions personally, stop trying to manage their feelings, stop twisting myself into pretzels to make them comfortable. Their discomfort was not my burden to carry. The confrontations became more direct as time went on. My Uncle Richard pulled me aside at a family gathering and told me point blank that I was too big for my britches and that I needed to remember where I came from. I looked him in the eye and said calmly but firmly, I remember exactly where I came from. I came from a family that taught me I had to hide my success to be loved. I came from a place where achievement was treated as arrogance and ambition was treated as betrayal. I'm not forgetting where I came from. I'm choosing not to stay there mentally and emotionally. You're welcome to celebrate with me or not, but I'm not going to apologize for working hard and being proud of what I've accomplished. His face turned red with anger. He started to sputter about respect and family loyalty and knowing my place. But I didn't back down. For the first time in my life, I didn't shrink, didn't apologize, didn't try to smooth things over. I simply stood there, calm and centered in my truth, and let him be uncomfortable. Eventually, he stomped away, muttering under his breath. Other family members who had witnessed the exchange looked at me with a mixture of shock and something that might have been admiration, though they didn't say anything. My cousin Marcus confronted me on social media, writing a long comment on one of my posts about how I had forgotten my roots and abandoned my family, and thought I was too good for everyone. Instead of deleting his comment or engaging in a public argument, I sent him a private message. I told him that I loved my family, that I hadn't forgotten anything, but that I was no longer willing to hide my achievements to make others feel better, about not pursuing their own goals. I told him that his feelings of inadequacy were not my responsibility, that my success didn't diminish his worth, and that if he felt threatened by my achievements, perhaps he should examine why that was instead of attacking me for living my life. He didn't respond, and we haven't spoken since. That hurt, because we had been close as children. But I also recognized that our relationship had been built on me being less successful than him, and once that dynamic shifted, he didn't know how to relate to me anymore. My Aunt Linda took a different approach. She started spreading rumors about me within the family, saying that I had become money-obsessed and materialistic, that I looked down on everyone, that I refused to help family members who were struggling. None of this was true. I had actually quietly helped several family members with financial difficulties, paying for car repairs, covering medical bills, helping with rent, but I had done so privately because I didn't want attention or gratitude. When I heard about the rumors, I was tempted to defend myself, to tell everyone about the ways I had helped, to prove that I wasn't the selfish person she was portraying me as. But I realized that would be playing into the same dynamic, seeking approval, trying to prove my worth, managing other people's perceptions. Instead, I let the rumors exist without fighting them. The people who knew me well knew the truth. The people who chose to believe rumors without asking me directly were revealing more about themselves than about me. It was painful to be misunderstood and misrepresented, but it was also strangely freeing to let go of the need to control everyone's opinion of me. Have you ever been in a situation where no matter what you did, someone was determined to misunderstand you? Tell me in the comments. The emotional journey of standing my ground was not linear or easy. There were days when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I was being selfish or arrogant, when I felt guilty for causing family discord. I would lie awake at night, replaying conversations, questioning whether I should have handled things differently, wondering if maintaining family harmony was worth the cost of my authenticity. The guilt was especially intense during holidays and family gatherings. I would see my relatives laughing and joking with each other while giving me cold shoulders and tense smiles, and I would feel like the outsider, the troublemaker, the one who had disrupted the family peace. Part of me wanted to apologize, to go back to hiding, to restore the comfortable dynamic even if it meant sacrificing myself. But every time I felt that pull, I would remember how it felt to constantly censor myself, to live in fear of others' reactions, to deny my own pride and joy. I would remember the anxiety that used to consume me before every family event, the rehearsed downplaying of achievements, the exhausting performance of being less than I was. And I would realize that the current discomfort, as painful as it was healthier than the old comfort. The old comfort was a slow poison, killing me softly, gradually eroding my sense of self and worth. The current discomfort was growing pains, the inevitable result of breaking free from unhealthy patterns and claiming my right to exist fully and authentically. I started therapy during this time, needing professional support to navigate the complex emotions and family dynamics. My therapist helped me understand concepts like tall poppy syndrome, where people try to cut down anyone who rises above the group, and family enmeshment, where individual identity is sacrificed for family cohesion. She helped me see that healthy families celebrate individual success and support each member's growth, while unhealthy families require conformity and punish deviation from group norms. She also helped me grieve the family I wished I had, the family that would have celebrated my achievements, supported my ambitions, and loved me unconditionally, regardless of my success or failure. Coming to terms with the reality that my family was not capable of being what I needed was one of the most painful processes of my life. It felt like a death in some ways, the death of hope, the death of the fantasy that someday they would change, that someday they would see me and celebrate me and be proud of me without reservation or resentment. But grieving that loss also created space for acceptance and for building the life and relationships I actually wanted, rather than the ones I thought I should want. I started investing more deeply in friendships with people who celebrated my success, rather than resented it. I built a chosen family of friends, mentors, and colleagues who genuinely wanted me to thrive, who asked about my goals and supported my journey, who celebrated my wins without making it about themselves. These relationships showed me what healthy support looked like, and the contrast with my family of origin became even more stark. With these people, I never felt like I had to hide or diminish myself. I could be fully authentic, share my excitement unfiltered, talk about my goals and dreams without fear of judgment or backlash. The relief and joy of these relationships was profound, and it reinforced my decision to stop accommodating toxic family dynamics. I also started setting clearer boundaries with family members. I stopped attending events where I knew I would be attacked or belittled. I stopped responding to passive-aggressive messages or engaging with people who were committed to misunderstanding me. I stopped offering explanations or justifications for my choices in my life. I simply lived my life and allowed others to react however they chose to react, without taking responsibility for their reactions. This was incredibly difficult because I had been trained my entire life to be a people pleaser, to smooth over conflict, to take responsibility for others' emotions. Learning to let people be upset without trying to fix it or make it better felt wrong at first, almost cruel. But my therapist helped me understand that allowing natural consequences and letting people sit with their own emotions is actually more respectful than constantly intervening and managing their feelings. It treats them as capable adults who can handle their own emotional experiences, rather than fragile children who need to be protected from uncomfortable feelings. Some family members eventually came around, though it took time. My younger sister, who had been watching my journey from the sidelines, started opening up about her own experiences of feeling pressure to stay small. She admitted that she had been hiding her own achievements, a successful blog she had started, a small business she was building because she was afraid of the family's reaction. Seeing me stand up for myself gave her courage to do the same, and we became closer than we had ever been, bonded by our shared experience of breaking free from family expectations. My mother also eventually softened, though it took a couple of years. She called me one day crying and apologized for not celebrating me the way she should have. She admitted that my success brought up her own regrets and disappointments about the choices she had made in her life, and it was easier to resent me than to confront those feelings. She said she was proud of me, and that she was sorry for not saying so sooner. It was the conversation I had been waiting for my entire life, and while it didn't erase the years of hurt, it did provide some healing and hope for rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms. But not everyone came around. My Uncle Richard never spoke to me again after our confrontation. My cousin Marcus continued to post passive-aggressive comments on social media, which I eventually addressed by unfollowing him and limiting his access to my posts. My Aunt Linda maintained her hostile stance, spreading rumors and making snide comments whenever she had the opportunity. And I had to make peace with that. I had to accept that some people would never be happy for me, would never celebrate me, would never see my success as anything other than a personal attack on their own choices and limitations. And that was okay. Their inability to celebrate me was not a reflection of my worth or the validity of my achievements. It was a reflection of their own limitations, their own wounds, their own unwillingness to grow and change. As time passed, I became more and more comfortable with my decision to stop hiding. The guilt and doubt that had plagued me in the beginning faded, replaced by a deep sense of peace and authenticity. I started to notice how much mental and emotional energy I'd been expending on managing other people's feelings and perceptions, energy that was now available for my own growth and goals. I felt lighter, freer, more genuinely myself than I had ever felt. My career continued to flourish, not because I was showing off or trying to prove anything, but because I was no longer sabotaging myself to keep others comfortable. I applied for promotions without downplaying my qualifications. I spoke up in meetings without second-guessing whether my ideas would make others feel inadequate. I networked and built relationships without worrying about appearing too ambitious, and the results were remarkable. I advanced faster than I had ever imagined possible, not because I was lucky or because things were handed to me, but because I was finally operating at my full potential without the artificial limitations I had imposed on myself to accommodate family dysfunction. I also started using my platform and success to help others who were struggling with similar dynamics. I started a blog where I wrote about my experiences with family expectations, toxic dynamics, and the journey to authentic self-expression. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people reached out to share their own stories of being expected to stay small, of hiding achievements to keep the peace, of struggling with family members who resented rather than celebrated their success. I realized how common this experience was, particularly for people who were the first in their families to achieve certain types of success, whether educational, professional, or financial. There's a phenomenon called first-generation guilt, where people who are the first in their families to go to college or achieve professional success feel guilty about surpassing their parents and family members. This guilt is often compounded by family members who, consciously or unconsciously, reinforce it through their reactions and expectations. My story resonated with so many people who were experiencing this same conflict, torn between loyalty to family and loyalty to self, between maintaining relationships and living authentically. Through my blog and the community that formed around it, I found my purpose. I started coaching people who were struggling with similar family dynamics, helping them understand that their success was not a betrayal, that setting boundaries was not selfish, that choosing authenticity over comfort was not only valid but necessary for their mental and emotional health. I saw person after person transform as they gave themselves permission to stop hiding, to stop apologizing, to stop making themselves small, and each transformation reinforced my own journey and my own choices. I also became more intentional about giving back in ways that felt meaningful to me. I started a scholarship fund for first-generation college students, providing not just financial support, but also mentorship and emotional support for navigating the complex dynamics of being the first in your family to pursue higher education. I volunteered with organizations that supported young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, helping them develop the skills and confidence to pursue their goals without guilt or apology. I invested in my community in ways that reflected my values and my journey, creating the support systems I wished I had when I was younger. And here's something interesting that happened. As I became more successful and more visible in my success, as I stopped hiding and started living fully, some family members who had been most critical started reaching out in different ways, not to apologize or to celebrate me, but to ask for advice, to request introductions to people in my network, to seek help with their own careers or businesses. The irony was not lost on me. These were the same people who had told me I was arrogant for sharing my success, who had accused me of showing off and thinking I was better than everyone, who had demanded I stay quiet and stay small. But now that they wanted something from me, now that my success could potentially benefit them, suddenly it was acceptable. Suddenly I wasn't showing off. I was someone who had connections, or someone who knew how to navigate the professional world. My initial reaction was anger. How dare they ask me for help after spending years tearing me down? How dare they benefit from the very success they had resented and tried to suppress? I was tempted to refuse out of spite, to point out the hypocrisy, to make them acknowledge their past behavior before I would consider helping them. But after sitting with these feelings and talking them through in therapy, I realized that responding with spite or anger would only perpetuate the cycle of hurt and dysfunction. It would make me just like them, using someone else's discomfort as a weapon, making help conditional on validation and apology. So I made a different choice. I helped when I could, and when I wanted to, not out of obligation or guilt, but out of genuine compassion and the recognition that hurt people and healed people help people. But I also set clear boundaries. I helped on my terms in ways that felt good to me, without allowing people to take advantage or to continue patterns of disrespect. If someone wanted my help but continued to make passive-aggressive comments about my success, I would politely decline and explain that I was happy to help people who genuinely supported me, but I was no longer available to people who resented me. Some people adjusted their behavior and we were able to build new, healthier relationships. Others continued their patterns and lost access to my time and resources, and I was okay with both outcomes. I had learned that I could be compassionate without being a doormat, generous without being a martyr, helpful without being self-sacrificing. I could set boundaries while still being kind, say no while still being loving, prioritize my own well-being while still caring about others. These were not contradictions, but rather the markers of healthy, mature relationships and self-concept. Looking back now, several years into this journey, I can see how profoundly my life has changed. I wake up every morning without the anxiety that used to plague me, without the constant mental rehearsal of how to downplay my life to make others comfortable. I share good news freely and joyfully, celebrating wins big and small without guilt or apology. I set goals that excite me, rather than goals that seem appropriately modest. I invest in myself, my education, my growth, my dreams without worrying about whether it makes others feel inadequate. The relationships I've lost, while painful, have made room for relationships that are genuinely supportive and life-giving. My circle is smaller now, but it's filled with people who actually want me to succeed, who celebrate my wins as if they were their own, who support me through challenges without using my struggles as evidence that I was wrong to pursue success. These relationships are reciprocal and healthy, based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than obligation and conditional approval. My relationship with my family has also evolved, though it looks different than I once hoped it would. Some family members and I have rebuilt our relationships on new, healthier foundations, where we can be honest about our different perspectives and values, while still maintaining love and respect. With these family members, I can share my life authentically, and they can share theirs. And we celebrate each other even when our paths look different. Other family members and I have much more limited contact, superficial relationships maintained mostly for the sake of family harmony at large gatherings, but without real intimacy or vulnerability. I've had to grieve the closeness we once had, or the closeness I wished we could have, but I've also found peace with the reality of what's actually possible. And with a few family members, I've had to cut contact entirely, recognizing that some relationships are too toxic to maintain even in limited form. This was perhaps the hardest decision of all, because family is supposed to be forever, and walking away from family goes against every message I received growing up about loyalty and obligation. But I've learned that blood relation doesn't give anyone the right to abuse, belittle, or manipulate me. I've learned that it's okay to prioritize my mental health and well-being over family expectations. I've learned that sometimes love means letting go, releasing people to their own journeys while protecting myself from their dysfunction. One of the most powerful realizations I've had is that my success doesn't take anything away from anyone else. Success is not a zero-sum game where one person's achievement means another person's failure. There is enough success, enough achievement, enough abundance for everyone who's willing to work for it. My getting a good job didn't prevent my cousin from getting one. My earning a high salary didn't reduce anyone else's earning potential. My achieving my goals didn't block anyone else from achieving theirs. But the scarcity mindset that dominated my family's worldview couldn't accommodate this truth. They operated from a belief that resources, opportunities, and success were limited, and therefore anyone who succeeded must have taken something that could have gone to someone else. This belief created resentment and competition instead of celebration and support. Understanding this helped me stop taking their reactions personally and recognize them as reflections of their own limiting beliefs, rather than accurate assessments of my character or my actions. I've also learned that discomfort is not always bad. The discomfort my family felt when I stopped hiding my success was actually necessary discomfort, the kind that signals a need for growth and change. If I had continued to manage their discomfort by hiding myself, they would never have had to confront their own beliefs, behaviors, and choices. My refusal to stay small forced a reckoning, and while that reckoning was uncomfortable for everyone, it was also potentially transformative. Some people chose to grow through that discomfort, examining their own beliefs and behaviors and making changes. Others chose to double down on resentment and avoidance. But either way, the discomfort served a purpose, and it wasn't my job to prevent it or manage it. I've learned to distinguish between healthy accommodation, where you adjust your behavior out of genuine care and respect for others, and unhealthy accommodation, where you diminish yourself to manage others' insecurities. Healthy accommodation might be choosing not to complain about first-world problems to someone who's dealing with genuine hardship, or being sensitive to timing when sharing good news with someone who's going through a difficult time. Unhealthy accommodation is hiding all your achievements, apologizing for your success, pretending your life is more difficult than it is, or making yourself small so others don't feel threatened. I've learned to do the former while refusing to do the latter. I think about the younger version of myself, the child holding that certificate with trembling hands, looking for validation and celebration, and receiving criticism and warning instead. I wish I could go back and tell her that her achievements were worth celebrating, that her pride was justified, that her dreams were valid. I wish I could tell her that the problem wasn't her success, but other people's inability to handle it, and that their inability was not her responsibility. I wish I could tell her to hold on to that certificate, to frame it, to let it be the first of many achievements she celebrated openly and joyfully. But since I can't go back, I honor that younger version of myself by living differently now, by celebrating every win, by refusing to shrink, by taking up space unapologetically. And maybe by sharing my story, I can be for others what I needed someone to be for me. A voice saying it's okay to shine, it's okay to succeed, it's okay to be proud of your accomplishments. Your success doesn't diminish anyone else. Your light doesn't put out anyone else's. Your achievements don't require apology or justification. You have the right to celebrate yourself, to share your joy, to live fully and authentically, even if it makes others uncomfortable. So here's what I want you to take away from my story, and this is really important. If you're someone who has been hiding your success, downplaying your achievements, making yourself small to keep others comfortable, I want you to know that you don't have to live that way. You deserve to be celebrated, not shamed. You deserve to take up space, not shrink into the background. You deserve to share your joy without guilt or apology. The people who love you genuinely will celebrate your success. They will be proud of you, support you, and cheer you on. They won't feel threatened by your achievements or diminished by your growth. If someone in your life can't celebrate your success, that says everything about them and nothing about you. Their discomfort is not your burden to carry. Their insecurities are not your responsibility to manage. Their resentment is not your problem to solve. You can be compassionate without being complicit in your own diminishment. You can love people without sacrificing yourself to make them comfortable. You can maintain relationships while also maintaining boundaries and authenticity. Standing up for yourself and refusing to hide your success doesn't make you arrogant or selfish. It makes you healthy and authentic. It models for others that success is possible and that it doesn't require apology. It challenges toxic family dynamics and creates space for healthier relationships to emerge. Will there be backlash? Probably. Will some people resent you and try to tear you down? Maybe. Will it be uncomfortable and painful at times? Absolutely. But will you be able to live with yourself, to look in the mirror and see someone who honored their truth, who refused to betray themselves, who chose authenticity over approval? Yes. And that's worth more than all the comfortable lies and self-betrayal in the world. I want to hear from you now. Have you ever been expected to stay quiet about your success? Have you ever hidden your achievements to keep the peace with family or friends? Have you ever felt guilty for being successful or proud? Share your story in the comments below. Let's create a community where we celebrate each other instead of tearing each other down, where success is met with genuine joy instead of resentment, where we can all shine without dimming anyone else's light. And if this story resonated with you, if it touched your heart or made you think differently about your own situation, please hit that like button. Your like tells me that this content matters, that these conversations are important, that there are others out there who need to hear this message. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's been hiding their light, someone who's been apologizing for their success. Let's spread the message that it's okay to shine, that success is not a sin, that being proud of your achievements is not arrogant. And please, subscribe to Living Through It for more stories like this, more conversations about navigating difficult relationships and choosing authenticity, more content that challenges you to live fully and unapologetically. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a video, because we're building a community here of people who refuse to shrink, who choose growth over comfort, who support each other's success instead of resenting it. Remember, your success story matters. Your achievements are valid. Your pride is justified. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Don't let anyone's discomfort dictate how fully you're allowed to live. Stand tall, shine bright, and celebrate every single win along the way. You've earned it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this community. And thank you for having the courage to live authentically even when it's hard. Until next time, keep living through it, keep growing through it, and keep shining through it. You deserve nothing less.